For this build, I'm going to use mostly scrap EVA foam left over from my other builds. I took this scrap piece, traced a square representing the area that the foam contacts the PVC barrel, and dremeled a cavity on one side for the PVC. I glued the EVA foam around the PVC and held it in place so that when the glue dried it would be in the shape of a U. I put support pieces inside the back area to help it keep its shape. I did the same thing to the bottom part of the gun and traced these lines for the drum magazine receiver and the injection slot on top. The area that I actually cut is smaller than the traced area because it represents the width of the drum magazine, while the wider traced area represents the edge of the receiver assembly. Cut scrap pieces of foam to build up the drum magazine receiver using reference photos as a guide. I don't have a lot of exact measurements for this build because the TF2 babyface blaster is essentially a stylized, cartoonish version of the sawn-off Browning A5 used by Bonnie Parker. If I used real-life A5 measurements and incorporated the other design elements, then it would look much smaller than the actual TF2 gun. I drew a rough sketch of the handle onto the EVA foam, cut it out, flipped it over, used it to trace another handle section, and cut that out too. Now even if you glued these two pieces together, the handle would still be too thin. So I glued strips of wood in the center, both to strengthen and widen the handle. Now slowly glue the handle together like this. You have to hold the two pieces together for several minutes before it's dry enough not to pull apart on its own. This is time consuming, but it's worth it. This is what it looks like before dremeling. Cut this small rectangular piece for the back of the forward grip, cut the circle that you removed in half, and save the pieces. Then cut the top of the rectangular piece halfway through the circle. Trace this piece onto the foam so that you can make a duplicate for the front of the grip. Glue each piece beneath the barrel. I cut these long strips and used them to assemble the front grip. I used this bottle cap for the front of the grip. I attached this scrap piece of PVC to the inside of the bottle cap.
According to one friend, she was known to moon the boys from her dorm window, earning her the nickname Kate Middlebum.
And cut a hole for it in front of the grip. You don't need to use PVC, you could use any tube or even just Dremel more foam if you need to. I dremeled the grip so that the grooves along the sides had slanted edges and the bottom edges followed the curved contour of the rest of the grip. I also dremeled the edges of the handle so that they'd be curved. For the drum magazine, I cut a 4.5-inch circle and a 3 3/4-inch circle. I used a PVC cutter to trim off the excess PVC of the barrel. I glued the circles into the gun because I didn't feel like making it removable. Although if you wanted to, you could very easily do that using Velcro. I traced this curved shape onto a cardboard cereal box and cut it out. I then wrapped it around the magazine, attaching it with hot glue. I did the same thing with the smaller piece for the front of the magazine, then I carved the sight out of foam. I cut a curved notch in front of the handle for the lever. I forgot to film this part, so I'm just showing you a brief example. I used the sponge brushes to coat all of the foam parts of the gun in 2 layers of Elmer's glue. And as you can see, I'm just dipping it in the glue and painting it right on. This does 2 things. First, it strengthens the foam, making it less likely to bend and giving it more realistic, solid feel. Second, it changes the texture from soft and foamy to a rigid and smooth surface that holds a paint job much more effectively. I'll be using this method of sealing EVA foam in Elmer's glue for all of my future DIYs that involve EVA foam. Now you should do a minimum of 6 coats of glue, being sure to allow for dry time between each coat. However, I didn't have that kind of time because I've been moving, which is also why I haven't been uploading videos, but that's a whole nother story. So I only had time for 2 coats. When all that was done, I spray painted the gun gray and mixed black and red acrylic to get brown so that I could paint the handle and grip to look like wood. I then used rub and buff to make the cap and ejection slot silver. You can also use regular silver paint. I traced this lever shape out of foam and cut it out. I then attached it to the gun. I really should have coated it with glue first, but I was extremely pressed for time. I cut and attached circular pieces of foam to the part of the lever inside the groove and coated them in rub and buff. It's important to note that the rub and buff will go onto foam much better if the foam has been encased in glue first. I found that out the hard way when I was making the syringe gun, which is why I'm doing this whole glue thing in the first place. I carved the trigger out of foam and fixed it and the lever in place using pieces of the chopstick. I painted the drum mag receiver black with acrylic paint and tried to drill holes for actual screws, but then realized the PVC got in the way, so I just carved these circles out of foam to make fake screw heads, using a narrow Dremel bit to make the flathead groove. Then I coated them in rub and buff and hot glued them in place. And there you have it. Babyface's blaster from Team Fortress 2. I'm going to sell this prop after the test film, so if you want it, there'll be a link in the description of that video when it's online.